Today we have the pleasure of talking with David Stover, founder of Bureo, a company that is leading the charge in finding solutions to the massive amount of plastic currently plaguing the world's oceans. David, welcome to Better with Bikes.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So tell us about Bureo. What does the business do? And tell us the story behind it.
Yeah, so we're an entity that's set up to educate fisheries and provide an end-of-life solution to prevent discarded fishing nets in the ocean. So we started in 2012, 2013 as a company focused on really trying to find solutions to prevent plastic from entering our ocean. So our team, really passionate for the ocean environment, we started to see this emerging issue of plastic pollution and something that really bothered us. So we have a background as surfers and mountain bikers and spending a lot of time in the outdoors. And this was an area where, it really bothered us to see this plastic in the ocean environment. And so we started kind of brainstorming ideas that we could help out. And that started as a bit of a nonprofit, almost a collection model when our first ideas came. And then that's kind of transformed and developed into a business that was originally building our own products. And now we're partnering with companies like Trek to find solutions to integrate recycled material and keep them out of our environment.
Tell us about the name. Where does Bureo come from?
Yeah, it's funny. It was a decision that we made very early on for the company, and it was chosen actually in honor of the country of Chile. So Bureo means the waves. It's sourced from a native language in Chile, and we were given an opportunity by the government of Chile to move to South America and set up our first recycling program, and we actually still base our programs out of Chile. So it was an honor to that country and a recognition to the people there to embrace the idea and embrace change for this problem.
So it's one thing to create awareness about a problem, it's another to offer solutions. Talk about the pickup points or the drop-off points for fishermen. How does that work?
Yeah, we've actually been fortunate enough to really be a part of this movement over the last 7 years and learn a lot from leading researchers and experts. And so originally, we had looked at the solution as a cleanup. Very much it's still looked at that way today, that we need to clean up our oceans. That kind of shifted over the last 4 to 5 years to more of a prevention model. And so looking at the sources, there's a really good analogy that's used in this space where if you had a bathtub that was overflowing with water, would you start mopping the floor or would you turn the tap off? And that's something that we always resonate with. So we actually focus now on education of the fisheries and making sure the fishermen know that their material has value at the end of life. And the problem with waste is that it's often perceived as having no value or little value. And in order to deal with that waste at the end of life, it costs time and money for people. And so our approach is to show, hey, we can incentivize you financially to take care of this waste. And then we're able to transform it into these products that are useful and, they're interesting. The stuff that we've made in the past is interesting enough where you can get people excited about wanting to participate in the program.
Consumers today are appropriately putting more pressure on companies to have a bit more transparency. What advice do you give to companies and perhaps how do you guide them in understanding that impact?
Yeah, I think it's certainly it's a good thing that being environmentally sustainable is a trend. We see it not as a trend, but really a focus going forward. But certainly as you look at marketing campaigns and consumers, they're a lot more interested in environmental products because they understand the concerns on the planet. And, I think a lot of companies don't do a very good job of really being transparent to that consumer about how their product or service directly impacts the environment. You kind of get broad brush strokes on, we do something that's green, or we're reducing our carbon emissions, or we're using recycled material. We're really focused on helping the consumer understand how they're making a tangible impact. And obviously our focus is on one specific type of waste and waste being one problem for the environment. But we've found it is effective that the consumer is able to understand what you're doing and what the tangible impact is. So if we're able to walk through and say, hey, fishing nets are a problem in the ocean, here's our proposed solution and how we work to eliminate that, and here's how we work with Trek to integrate that material into their products so they don't have to rely on new sources of plastic for this specific component. And we found that being transparent and communicating that to the consumer really identifies with that. And additionally, especially for a company focused in the outdoor sporting industry, is the consumer generally wants to be involved. They want to be a part of the solution, and sometimes it's frustrating that they're not given that opportunity. And so we've seen that, we've had a lot of response from consumers that are like, hey, thanks for what you're doing, and hey, it's really cool what you guys are up to. We need more programs like this for other types of materials, which obviously we agree with as well.
So let's talk about those materials. You have a process where you're collecting these nets that have been discarded, literally, and you're transforming them into a usable tool set or a usable product. Talk about the transformation from net to pellet, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually it's a pretty simple process. Definitely, there's some intricacies in developing it, but effectively, we had backgrounds in engineering by schooling, and Kevin on our team had worked professionally in engineering. And the idea was, we first had to identify the types of material. And so if you look at a specific waste stream like fishing nets, you have to understand what type of that material it is. The key thing with recycling is getting to a consistent and clean source. Here in the U.S., even we struggle to effectively recycle, especially at curbside. So for us, our program is kind of hyper-focused on a couple different types of material. So we specifically work with nylon and high-density polyethylene. Most of our supply chain is around nylon, where that material is collected, cleaned, and that's a pretty laborious process. So there's a lot of manual labor that has to go through the nets to take out any foreign debris, and then the nets are shredded down. Just picture a big blender where the net gets chewed up into more of like a fluff, and then that's melted down and put into little pellets. And those little pellets are actually what all plastic products are made out of. And once we get back into that pellet form, then we can manufacture products like the Trek Bat Cage through a process called injection molded.
So a visit to your website showed me that you're working with a number of different brands, including some products that are very familiar, not just to outdoors people, but perhaps in general, a wide range from brands we know, but also products that we wouldn't necessarily associate with the material itself. Can you talk about some of those other corporate partnerships that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think our business has transitioned quite a bit, especially in the last couple of years, but we actually started as a skateboard company. So we started molding skateboard decks in South America in 2013. We still make skateboards. It's a smaller part of our business now. And since then, we've looked at applications for the material from sunglasses. We work with a company, Costa Sunglasses, out of Florida. We mold sunglasses with them. I'm sure people are familiar with Jenga, the stacking game. We've worked with Jenga on an ocean Jenga game. We have a partner in New York, Human Scale. They make ergonomic office chairs. We mold the back for them. And then certainly, as surfers and skateboarders growing up, we have a project with Futures Surf Fins out of Huntington Beach. So we mold a high-performance surf fin that's used for that application. And then we actually haven't launched a product to market, but we've been partnered through our investor, Patagonia, the outerwear company. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with them. We've been developing a number of applications within their product line that are set to be commercialized in the next 1 to 2 years.
So those companies you mentioned and others have created what's called Next Wave, and really a group of companies dedicated to finding solutions to this issue with oceans and ocean plastics. It was really through that organization that we became introduced. Talk about your relationship with Next Wave and how you see that as helping other organizations learn about these tools.
Yeah, sure. So we were approached by the Next Wave team a couple years ago, and it was a great platform that they had set up that would bring together companies to explore how we can replicate these solutions and work together to really at scale make a difference. And so we're a participant in the working group. We've certainly had great experiences in meeting with a lot of the companies there. One of our partners, Human Scale, who we make the chair with, they're also a member of the working group. And through that group, actually, we met Trek, I believe if not the first, one of the very first meetings that was held in Austin at Dell's headquarters. And, through the presentation, one of the benefits of the working group is just learning what other companies and initiatives are doing there. And so we were talking about our supply chain to recycle fishing nets, and Stefan and the Trek team that was there had come up afterwards and said, hey, we have supply chains for this material. We have some applications. Why don't we start talking? And so I think that's the exact purpose of the working group, is to really connect companies and initiatives and provide an example, for the mass market. I think the biggest win of Next Wave is really being a big case study for companies around the world to adopt supply chains, and also to be a system of checks and balances on that idea that if someone's being sustainable, are there other companies in the room that are pushing forward agendas that would be helpful for their supply chain as well? And I think we've had a lot of positive reactions with the group.
Well, you mentioned Dell, and it was really through that initial conversation, the admiration for how Dell was approaching packaging, and that led to the conversations and ultimately to this group and Next Wave and a role that Trek could play. Those companies will help, I think, to really expand that platform, as you said. I want to return to the first point we made about a specific product. So the Trek Bat Cage is really a product that didn't change for a very long time. Really the same since 1997, super popular, made right here in Wisconsin in Oconomowoc, and just a great product. So on one level, there was no motivation to change that. Mm-hmm. It was something really doing quite well. But early in the discussions, there was an opportunity to talk to you about the materials. Tell us that story. How did you first learn of this idea, and what was your first reaction?
Yeah, I mean, when we started talking about ideas and the different applications, some of which we're still working on today, other than the Bat Cage, this is an approach that we've taken on a number of our projects, looking at a supply chain and finding, the right starting point. And when we learned that the cage was used, I think it was a favorite cage from a lot of the team riders. It was one of the most popular products that certainly Trek, I think, has ever produced. It was produced locally in Oconomowoc. There was a lot of things about the application that, we were interested in. I think the connection to water, too. It's interesting that the cage is also used to carry fresh water, which obviously has a connection back to the ocean. And then from the construction side of it, as engineers and designers, we always, remind our partners that we don't want to recreate the material. So if there's a product that doesn't utilize the material we collect, it doesn't necessarily make sense to redesign it to use that material. The most reasonable applications are ones where the material is already being used in, say, a virgin form. And so the Bat Cage really hit all of those things, where we could replace the material that was being used with our recycled source of nylon. And it's also a good test point. We're able to show that performance-wise, even for a product that's heavily used, that it's functional. We're able to test it effectively, and then that provides a platform to look at other sources of that material within Trek's supply chain.
You have encouraged us to really look at the impact, and we found in the first year 44,000 square feet, it's about 4,000 pounds of discarded fishing nets, will be used for production of these cages. And we're super proud of that, but that's not a very big number, is it? What's the order of magnitude here of the plastic problem in the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually it is a heavily researched point. It's also a contentious one. So I'll stick to some of the published stats. It's estimated that about 8 million tons of plastic enter our ocean every year. As far as like a count, there's been a study that shows there's about 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic floating in our ocean. There's a lot of different studies done broadly on that. It's estimated that 10% of all the plastic in the ocean is sourced from discarded fishing gear, so the types of nets that we'd be collecting, and potentially up to even 20 to 40% in certain certain areas. So those are a couple of kind of the key stats of it. One thing that we always get back to is that recycling rates haven't been going up even in developed countries of recent, and we know the plastics industry is creating more new plastic every year. So if you do the math, it's pretty clear that even with recycling initiatives and programs like ours, we're fighting an uphill battle. And so there's a lot to be done, not just with nylon, not just with fishing nets, but across all industries for that. And so for us, we have pivoted a bit in the last couple of years to partner with companies like Trek so that we can expand our impacts. So in our first year, we recycled about 10,000 kilograms in 2013. We're on pace to do just over 500,000 in 2019. So we've been able to grow quite a bit just in the last few years, and it's something that we want to scale and replicate and show that we are having tangible impacts. But it's important to note that other than being one type of material from one industry in one geography, we're kind of really just need to be one link in that chain of companies around the world that are looking at types of waste, specifically with plastic, and figuring out how do we redesign, how do we collect, how do we promote circular economies, and really utilize the material that's out there as opposed to putting reliance on continued expansion of new plastics in our economy.
The acceleration that you described is incredible over time. Are there products that you're really excited about that are currently being moved to this material, or partnerships that are just forming that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think our partnership with Patagonia, we're looking at really technical applications for the material, and it's kind of been a goal of ours to show that you don't necessarily have to give up performance with recycled materials, and it's really on us to kind of prove that out, and that's an exciting project we're working on. Certainly in the mobility space, in the long run, one of the advantages of engineered polymers like nylon is that it is lightweight and really durable. And so if you look at certainly bikes, if you look at EV vehicles, electric vehicles, and the applications for integration of recycled materials, we're really excited about kind of those broader industrial applications that can not just solve an issue with waste and create a positive, tangible solution for something like recycled plastic, but you can also go after another environmental issue like emissions and look at more electric vehicles and have an impact beyond just keeping waste out of our environment, but actually tying it back also to broader environmental issues.
You literally had a front row seat, perhaps on a surfboard, to seeing a problem that was happening. And you had a choice to make to just maybe talk about it or mention it, or to actually do something. And we really admire your passion, the results to date, and I think the inspiration that you are creating. Each of these product stories is inspiring others to consider their product. I know that is certainly true at Trek, and we're very excited about challenging the status quo, but also just our way of thinking, as you've described other organizations are doing as well.